Hi, this is Cenkus with Cenkus Law and Braaten Woods. I'm an M&A advisor and an M&A lawyer. If you like this video, check out merger-resources.com. There's all sorts of videos, articles, templates, checklists, tools, all about mergers and acquisitions, and all free all the time, so check it out. Okay, this is the third and final video in a series about M&A motivations, or why buyers buy businesses. The first one we talked about synergistic reasons. It's a buzzword but it's not going away in the M&A context. Things like cost cutting and cross-selling, that's our synergy reasons, and I kind of painted them as more defensively oriented. And then the second video we talked about expansion reasons. So buying competencies, buying talent, buying into new markets, buying new distribution channels, things like that. This third and final video is about miscellaneous motivations. So, and they don't fit neatly into offensive or defensive. They're just sort of four other reasons that I commonly see companies playing the M&A game, buyers getting into it. So the first is bargain shopping. And this you can think of as picking off assets in bankruptcy, sort of buying distressed companies. Some acquirers are really value driven, and you get those values often out of bankruptcy, but not always. Those can be pretty competitive environments as well. But just trying to find opportunities where the business is distressed. Okay, so that's bargain shopping, trying to pick up things, and it tends to be assets. Buying operations that are distressed can have all sorts of unseen cost and consequences. I mean, if teams have been sort of decimated and talent has walked out the door already, or it's got one eye on the door, trying to buy a business that's, I mean, it's just generally not viewed as a really kind of penny wise, pound foolish is the phrase I used to hear years ago. It's basically like, yeah, that might be cheap, but it's cheap for a reason. That's not really what I'm talking about. I'm talking about trying to buy, just picking off assets, often not really buying operations per se and people. You're just trying to get really good deals, and again, it's in a distressed context. That's the first of our four miscellaneous motivations. The second is control. And you'll often see companies want to control their supply chain, for example, or a vertical merger, vertical integration is acquiring another company, not a competitor who does what you do and competes against you, but they're sort of up or down the chain, so they could be a supplier of something. So an example of this is AOL and Time Warner. Years ago, they came together, and it was viewed as a great marriage between content. So that was Time Warner created content, and AOL had distribution, or basically needed content. You're seeing some of these deals now. I think AT&T is kind of back at looking for marrying those things up. So sometimes these kind of deals are driven by wanting to control the supply chain. And sometimes that's necessary, because just to deliver, like Apple has said this before, that they sometimes do deals like this because they really want to really be in charge of how the products are manufactured. It's really important to them. And there's something to be said for that. Other times, though, they're driven not really off the idea that we just can't get what we want if we outsource it. We've got to somehow control that. It's more this idea that, hey, this will be a perfect marriage and we'll have better economics. We'll be able to sort of one-stop shop. We'll somehow get it makes sense to just vertically integrate like this. Like a restaurant, why not, if you're running the restaurant, why not own the farm? Okay. Now, this kind of thinking that generally doesn't pan out in the world of M&A. And the reason is because running a farm and running a restaurant are two very different businesses. And the idea that somehow putting them together will give you some sort of financial or economic benefit is illusory. It doesn't turn out to be the case, because you're still going to have the same costs of running that farm and the same costs of running the restaurant. So if it were such that you could put them together and eliminate a lot of overhead, right, or slim down on the corporate office, or have a little bit less marketing, or whatever it is, then we would think about it in terms of those synergy reasons. We'd think about it as consolidation and cost cutting. But down here, if they're two totally different businesses, there won't tend to be that much synergy. You may really need separate CEOs and CFOs because they're totally different businesses. And so in the end, you've got different businesses and they have their same cost structure. There really aren't any huge cross-selling opportunities. So it tends to be these vertical mergers are really out of favor because they've over time proven to not be that successful. And we certainly live in a world that where people value niching down, focusing on your core competency, being just really good at what you do, rather than trying to be, own the world. And so again, this kind of control-driven reason, which shows itself often as vertical integration, can make some sense where it's just so fundamental. You can think of a restaurant where, look, we just need these cows to be massaged in a certain way or something, right? It's like, you can imagine it's so fundamental to their value proposition that they just don't trust anyone else to do it. I would argue kind of against that for some reasons, but I can imagine that. And that could be a compelling reason. Just about every other time you see this, it's really tends to not really pan out. Okay, third miscellaneous reason is diversification. And so that comes in a couple different forms, but if diversification, if what a business is doing is saying, hey, we sell pet products and our stores are just in the Midwest, we really need to be sort of have some diversification because what if the Midwest economies aren't doing very well? We really need to sort of spread out and be in the South and the Northeast or something. Let's just say, then that would be to me more like expanding into a different market, and we would cover that in video 2. This form of diversification is simply, we need to be in a different business, okay? And you do see it, and you see it years and years ago, the conglomerate eras up to the 1960s or something. Businesses would take the money in and they'd spread it out in a lot of different ways, and you'd see these businesses that were all sorts of different things. They were just, the conglomerates were all sorts of different businesses. They'd be in financial services and retail and sell products and own restaurants and just kind of craziness. And you're starting to see, it's interesting, you're starting to see a lot of companies who are opening up restaurants and coffee shops and so forth in today's world. But in that instance, like where we're seeing it today, like Capital One has these cafes. They're not really, I don't think, trying to be in the coffee shop business. They're trying to use that as a brand tool, as a marketing tool. And that's very different than saying, hey, we're Capital One, we made a lot of money, and we just also think that's a great business. Let's get in the coffee shop business and compete against Starbucks. Like, that is diversification in a way that the market doesn't really favor and has proven, at least historically, and certainly in the past 40, 50 years, not to be a great use of shareholders' money. And if you're a public company, corporate lawyers would tell you, corporate or professors would tell you, hey, give the money back and let the shareholders go invest in Starbucks rather than going head to head with them when you're in the banking business, right? So diversification of that type is generally out of favor, and there's a lot of reasons that it is. I worked for a company that made a diversification move. They just really fundamentally didn't like their core business, right? And what we bought into was similar, but it was quite different, and it wasn't tangential. It wasn't such an obvious next product we'd get into. What it really came down to is we didn't like the business we were in, and that one didn't turn out very well. And part of that is because our company didn't understand that company. It's just wildly different, and so there's a lot of risk associated with making like a entirely transformative acquisition like that. So that's number 3. Number 4 is, and this is really, it's hard to say there's any justification for this one. I've sort of bent over backwards on the last 3 to talk about ways in which they can work and give them some degree of credibility in the world, and like there's some place for those. But this 4th one is exceedingly common, but it's one that you would probably argue has no place anywhere, even though it shows up all the time. And it's one that you will never be on a conference, listen to an analyst call or a stockholder call on public markets and hear a CEO admit this. But a lot of M&A is driven off empire building, and it's driven off personal desire to grow one's empire, to have a bigger company. Sometimes you'll see C-suites trying to have more under their control because that favors them. They'll get more, they'll be compensated higher. You see a lot of action in the public markets that really is driven, if you really pull it apart, and you're close enough to really understand the motivations, it's C-suites and teams just looking to expand their control of the world. It's ego-driven activity, or it's lack of anything else to do. I mean, not really, they've got plenty of other things to do, but you see a lot of M&A is driven off, I want a bigger this, I want a bigger that, and it's justified for one of the other 11 reasons that I talked about. Usually one of the first 8 I talked about in videos 1 and 2, but that's a big driver. And when you can't find any other reason, you might look for this one. And obviously I don't have to tell you how that one often pans out not super well. So if you've got any experience with any of these, drop a line. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to talk to you about what you've seen work and not work. And if you like what you saw today, subscribe. Thanks for stopping by.